Before we dive into this incredible story, please subscribe to my channel, K9 Miracle Stories. Many people watch without subscribing, and your support helps us share more amazing tales like this one. If it weren't for the dog, the wedding would have gone exactly as planned. Perfect dress, perfect vows, perfect lies. But on a sun-soaked afternoon in Charleston, South Carolina, just as the bride took her first step down the aisle, a German shepherd named Max did something no one could have predicted. He barked, not just a warning bark, not a confused yelp, but a furious, relentless snarl, sharp and loud, straight at the bride. Gasps rippled through the garden. Phones stopped recording. The string quartet trailed off mid-chord. At first, people chuckled. "He's never liked white dresses," someone whispered. But when Max lunged forward, yanking against his leash with wild desperation, all humor drained from the moment. "Whose dog is that?" the bride asked, her voice sugar-coated but trembling at the edges. It was her fiancé's. And that dog had never, not once, reacted to anyone that way. The ceremony was taking place at the Magnolia Estate, a grand, colonial-style venue known for hosting Southern high society weddings. Rows of white folding chairs lined the lawn. Lavender and baby's breath danced in mason jars. A gentle breeze rustled the Spanish moss hanging from the oak trees above. Ethan Daniels, the groom, stood tall in his tailored navy suit. He looked stunned as his best friend, four-legged and fierce, tried to rip free from the leash held by his younger brother, Noah. "Max! Hey, sit! Sit!" Noah barked, tightening his grip as the dog snarled like he'd spotted a threat, but Max's eyes never left the bride. Sofia Alvarez. She stood at the edge of the aisle, motionless in her ivory lace gown. Her veil fluttered slightly in the breeze, but her expression remained unreadable. Calm. Too calm. Someone suggested taking the dog away. Ethan hesitated. "He doesn't do this," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. But time ticked forward. The officiant cleared his throat, and eventually, with one last yank, Noah dragged Max toward the back, into the manor house. The ceremony resumed, but the moment never quite recovered. Inside the reception hall, Max scratched at the wooden door. He paced in circles, ears forward, tail stiff. Something was wrong, something no one could explain. Meanwhile, outside, Sofia became everyone's favorite subject. "She handled that so gracefully," a guest commented. "So elegant under pressure," another added. But Ethan's mother, Margaret Daniels, didn't smile. She leaned over to her husband and whispered, "That wasn't right. Did you see her reaction? No flinch, no confusion, just calculation." Still, the wedding went on. Vows were exchanged. Rings slipped onto fingers. And when Ethan kissed his new wife, the guests applauded, though more nervously than before. The reception buzzed with champagne toasts and small talk. Ethan made rounds, hugging old friends and shaking hands with colleagues. But Sofia disappeared for a few minutes. She said she needed a moment to adjust her makeup. She didn't go to the powder room. She went upstairs. Max, still trapped inside a guest room, went wild the second she passed by. He leapt against the door with a force that rattled the hinges, barking with a rage that echoed down the hallway. Downstairs, a staff member asked, "Do you want us to let the dog out now, Mr. Daniels?" Ethan looked up from his drink. "Yeah, I think so." When Max bounded down the hallway, he didn't run to Ethan. He sprinted toward the stairs, toward Sofia. And in that moment, we'd love to remind you, if you believe animals know more than we do, and if stories like this move you, please subscribe to our channel, K9 Miracle Stories, where we tell real and inspired stories about dogs who change lives. Now, back to the story. Sofia returned, composed as ever. Max sat nearby, ears forward, eyes locked on her every move. That night, as guests dined and danced under string lights, Margaret couldn't shake her unease. She'd always trusted her instincts. A retired prosecutor, she'd learned long ago that sometimes the person with the prettiest smile is hiding the darkest secret. She excused herself and walked back into the manor house, heading upstairs where Sophia had been earlier. What she found made her blood run cold. In the upstairs hallway, a photograph had fallen from the wall, or maybe it had been knocked over. As Margaret picked it up, she noticed something odd about the backing. It had been tampered with. Peeling it gently, she discovered a folded paper tucked behind the frame. It wasn't much, just a list of names, bank account numbers, and scribbled initials. But one name stood out, Elena Morales, and beneath it, a note, finalize account transfer post-ceremony. No delays. Margaret stared at it, then back at the hallway leading to the bridal suite. Sofia Alvarez was not who she said she was. Downstairs, the music played on. Ethan twirled his bride under the soft lights, smiling as if nothing had changed. But upstairs, his mother stood frozen, heart racing. Max, who had followed her up quietly this time, sat beside her, gaze fixed on the door at the end of the hallway. A low growl escaped his throat. Margaret knew that sound well. It was the sound her old partner's K9 had made before finding a murder weapon, the sound dogs make when they sense something dark hiding behind charm. Something dangerous. Ethan couldn't sleep that night. The wedding had gone off without a hitch, at least, that's what people said. The photos were beautiful, the food was praised, and the dance floor had been packed until midnight. But something was wrong. Max was still agitated. Even now, past 2 a.m., the dog paced along the hallway outside their bedroom, occasionally stopping at the door, pressing his nose to the bottom, then letting out a soft but persistent growl. Sophia lay beside Ethan, sound asleep. Her breathing was steady, her hand resting gently on his chest, but Ethan stared at the ceiling, heart racing. His mother's face from earlier that evening kept flashing through his mind. She hadn't said much, just gave him that look, stern, warning, motherly. Then there was the dog. Max had been his best friend for 7 years. That dog had been there through his father's death, his first job, even his late-night panic attacks. Max didn't bark for no reason, and he had never shown aggression like that before, not even toward strangers. Ethan gently lifted Sophia's hand from his chest and slid out of bed. Down the hall, his parents' room was dark, but when he opened the door without knocking, he found his mother sitting upright, a stack of papers on her lap. "You couldn't sleep either," she said. "What's going on, Mom?" Ethan asked. "Why are you digging into Sophia's name?" She looked at him for a long moment. "Because the name she gave us doesn't exist. Not legally. Not in this country." Ethan sat on the edge of the bed. "That's not possible. She has a passport, a driver's license." "All fake," Margaret interrupted. She picked up a photocopy from the stack. "I had this run through 2 different databases. There's no record of a Sofia Alvarez born in Caracas in 1992. No school transcripts, no medical history, no immigration record. Nothing." He felt like the floor beneath him tilted slightly. "Then who is she?" Margaret hesitated. "I found another name, Elena Morales. There's a pattern. A woman using that name has been involved in at least 3 high society weddings in the past 6 years. Each time, she vanished after the wedding, and each groom reported major financial losses shortly after." "You think she's marrying me for my money?" Ethan asked, barely able to say it out loud. "I think she's done it before, and I think she's very good at it." He stood and ran a hand through his hair. "This doesn't make sense. Sophia, Elena, whoever she is, she's never asked for anything. She always told me she wanted to sign a prenup. She never touched my bank account." "Which makes her smarter than the others," Margaret said. "She's not rushing. She's playing the long game." The next morning, Ethan didn't confront her. He couldn't. He needed more proof, needed to believe there was still a chance she was who she said she was. Sophia woke up cheerful, humming as she got dressed. She asked about the honeymoon itinerary, joked about the chaos with Max, and said she wanted to spend the day at the beach. Ethan smiled through it all, but as soon as she left the room, he turned to Max. "You saw something," he whispered, kneeling beside the dog. "Help me figure out what." He started by searching the guest room she had used before the wedding. Most of her things had already been moved, but one suitcase still sat under the bed. He opened it carefully. Inside were clothes, cosmetics, and a small makeup bag with a zippered pocket. He unzipped it slowly, heart pounding. There it was, a different passport, a different name, Elena Morales, Venezuelan. The photo matched Sophia's face, even if the hair was darker and shorter in the image. He didn't stop there. Behind a panel inside the suitcase lining, he found a flash drive taped flat. He took it to his laptop. It wasn't encrypted. Folder after folder opened to scan documents, email records, screenshots of bank transfers. Every folder was labeled by location and date: Panama City, Geneva, Dallas. Photos of men, wedding photos. She had done this before, at least 4 times. Ethan sat frozen for minutes. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. How could he have missed it? She had looked him in the eyes and said she loved him. She had kissed him like she meant it. And she was lying the entire time. That evening, he told his mother everything he found. "We have to stop her," he said. Margaret didn't hesitate. "I already contacted someone at the State Department. They're interested. What do we do until then?" "Watch her," she said. "Don't tip her off." The next few days were a strange theater of smiles and silence. Sophia laughed, cooked breakfast, called his relatives to thank them for the wedding gifts, but she never mentioned her past, never said anything about Caracas or Panama or Dallas. Ethan kept pretending until one night when she slipped into the study, thinking no one was awake. Ethan watched from the hallway, heart racing, as Sophia typed something into her laptop. He crept closer. On the screen, he saw an offshore banking interface. She was moving money, not from his accounts, but likely preparing for it. Then he saw something worse, a folder on the desktop, Daniel's holdings plan. She had already mapped out his family's financials. Back in his room, Ethan sat in the dark, fists clenched. Max lay beside him, tail still for once, not barking, just waiting. They both were. Ethan didn't sleep at all. At 3:22 a.m., he was still staring at the folder burned into his mind: Daniel's holdings plan, the spreadsheet, the wiring instructions, the offshore accounts. Every second of silence that passed now felt like a countdown. He knew. She knew something was wrong, and he was sitting on a live wire. Down the hall, Sophia was asleep, or pretending to be. But Ethan no longer had the luxury of doubt. Not after what he'd seen. Not after the flash drive, the fake passports, the money trails leading across 3 continents. He wasn't just the latest groom in her game. He was probably her final act. Max, lying on the rug near the bedroom window, lifted his head and growled low when Sophia shifted in the other room. "Yeah," Ethan whispered. "I feel it too." The next morning, Sophia was cheerful, too cheerful. She danced barefoot in the kitchen, scrambling eggs, humming old Sinatra. She wore his shirt, made his coffee just the way he liked it, as if they were newlyweds in some perfect honeymoon fantasy, as if she wasn't preparing to gut him financially and vanish without a trace. Ethan watched her carefully, every movement, the way she smiled too wide, the way she asked him again, casually, "Do you still want to go over the trust accounts today, darling?" That was her next step. She was ready to make her move. He played along. "Yeah, maybe after lunch," he said, sipping coffee. "There's a few things I want to pull together first." He had already made up his mind. He wasn't waiting for law enforcement anymore. She was slipping too fast, and the clock was ticking. He needed to act before she did. That afternoon, Ethan asked Sophia to meet him at his father's old study, the one with the leather chairs and the wall safe, where his dad used to do all his legal work. Sophia showed up in a soft beige dress and pearl earrings, professional, innocent, controlled. She didn't notice Max sitting in the far corner of the room, watching silently. "I thought we could talk," Ethan said. Sophia smiled, folding her hands. "Of course. About the finances, about everything." Her smile faded just slightly. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "I know who you are." The room fell silent, utterly, completely silent. Sophia didn't move, didn't blink, just sat there, eyes locked on his. He pulled out the flash drive, placing it gently on the desk between them. "I found it," he said, "along with the other passport." "Elena." She didn't flinch, not even a sigh. "I've read every file. Geneva, Panama, Dallas. I know everything." Still nothing, until finally, she leaned back and smiled. "Then I guess there's no more pretending," she said softly. For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He had braced for tears, denial, maybe even a meltdown. But this, calm, polished, cold. "You were going to clean me out," he said. "I was," she replied. "And what stopped you?" Sophia turned her head, eyes shifting toward the dog in the corner. "Honestly," she said, "him. That damn dog wouldn't stop watching me." Max stood now, silent but alert, like a soldier in formation. "You've done this before," Ethan said. "4 times," she nodded. "That you know of." "Why?" Sophia shrugged. "Because men like you believe in fairy tales. You want the beautiful mystery woman, the one with no baggage, no past. So when she walks in with a smile and a story, you don't question a thing." "I loved you," Ethan said, voice shaking. "No," she said, "and that was real. That's the part one didn't plan for." He stared at her. "So what now? You run?" She stood slowly, walking toward the window. "I should. That was the plan, until Max decided I was a problem." "You were." Sophia turned, face unreadable. "But maybe I don't have to be." He laughed bitterly. "You think you can just walk away from this? That we forget the lies, the theft, the fake name?" She took a step forward. "I can give it all back. Every cent I moved. I haven't touched your accounts yet. I swear it." "You really think that's enough?" he said. "I think," her voice cracked slightly. "I think if you wanted me arrested, you already would have done it. I think part of you still sees me as the woman you danced with, the woman you kissed in the rain. I think part of you doesn't want to hate me." Ethan's jaw tightened. She wasn't entirely wrong, but she was right for the wrong reason. "I don't hate you," he said. "But I'm not letting you ruin my life." She nodded, slow and accepting. "So what now?" He picked up the phone from the desk. "I've already made the call." Outside, the sound of tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled up in the driveway. Sophia's face finally changed. She paled. "You turned me in," she whispered. "You turned yourself in the day you said, 'I do.'" Agents walked into the house, calm and professional. Max barked once. Sophia didn't resist. They took her with nothing but the clothes on her back and one final look over her shoulder at Ethan, no anger, just a kind of sadness, a flicker of something that might have been real if the lies hadn't buried it. Ethan stood at the window long after they left. Max sat beside him, pressing his head against Ethan's hand. "Guess you were right," Ethan whispered, voice rough. Max didn't bark. He just stayed close. That night, Ethan walked through the house, room by room, as if seeing it for the first time. Everything still looked perfect, photos still framed, gifts still unopened, the faint scent of her perfume still lingering. But it wasn't a home anymore. Not yet. At the end of the hallway, he opened the guest room. Sophia's suitcase still sat there. Inside, folded neatly, was a letter, handwritten, "Ethan, if you're reading this, I already know how it ended. I never planned to fall for you, but I did. That was my biggest mistake. Not the con, not the plan. Falling in love was what broke everything. I'm sorry. I couldn't be the person you thought I was. Maybe I wish I had been." Ethan read it twice. Then he folded it back and let it fall into the suitcase. He closed the lid, then turned to Max. "Let's go home." 2 days after Sophia was taken into custody, the house felt quieter than ever. No more humming in the kitchen, no perfume trailing in the hallway, no laughter echoing from the sunroom, just silence and the soft shuffle of Max's paws on hardwood floors. Ethan tried to return to a normal routine. He answered emails, took conference calls, stared blankly at spreadsheets, but his mind drifted. The woman he had fallen in love with didn't exist, or at least, not the way she presented herself. The woman he married had walked into his life with a smile and walked out in handcuffs. And yet, part of him kept replaying that final letter she left, "I never planned to fall for you. That was my biggest mistake." A mistake or a confession? Max followed Ethan everywhere now, into the kitchen, the office, even the bathroom door. He never left his side, as if the dog still sensed something unresolved, something not yet safe. That morning, as Ethan sipped coffee on the back porch, Max sat beside him, ears flicking toward every small sound in the wind. "Yeah," Ethan muttered, scratching Max's head. "I feel it, too." Later that afternoon, Ethan began going through Sophia's, no, Elena's, things, not to punish himself, not out of spite, but because something didn't add up. He had given the authorities everything, the flash drive, the fake passport, the files on her computer. But he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something else, something missing. He started in the guest room again. The suitcase was gone, taken as evidence, but a small jewelry box had been forgotten in the top dresser drawer. Inside was a gold locket he didn't recognize, not hers, not his. The initials engraved on the back, AR. Not Sofia Alvarez, not Elena Morales. A third name. He popped it open. Inside, 2 tiny photos, one of a man in a military uniform, the other a young girl, maybe 6 years old. On a hunch, Ethan opened his laptop and searched the name engraved in the corner of the locket's clasp, Ariana Rivera. And that's when the pieces started falling into place. Ariana Rivera wasn't a con artist. She was a missing person, reported 12 years ago in Houston, aged 17, who disappeared from foster care. Ethan stared at the photo, the facial structure, the eyes. It was her, Sophia, Elena, Ariana, whoever she had become. She had once been a lost teenager with no home and no family. The trail from there to here suddenly didn't look like a scam. It looked like survival. He clicked deeper into public records. Ariana's case had been marked closed due to inactivity 2 years ago. No family ever came forward. No one looked anymore, until now. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep again. Max kept pacing in circles at the foot of the bed. He stopped once, barked sharply, then ran to the hallway. Ethan followed him to the upstairs office. Max stood at the built-in bookshelf, sniffing, tail rigid. He began to scratch at the wood. Ethan knelt beside him and knocked along the paneling, a soft thunk, a hollow space. He grabbed a screwdriver and pried it open. Inside, hidden in a narrow cavity, was a manila envelope, no label, no dust. He opened it. A collection of handwritten letters, notes, and torn documents. One of them had a letterhead from a private adoption agency. Another had a court seal, State of Texas, termination of parental rights. Another, a childhood medical record from an inpatient psychiatric facility. And taped to the inside flap of the envelope, one final photo, her as a child, standing next to a woman with a name tag that read Officer L. Alvarez. That night, Ethan sat in silence for hours, the evidence spread across the floor like puzzle pieces no one had tried to connect before. Sophia, or Ariana, wasn't just running from the law. She had been running her whole life, from a system that forgot her, from identities forced on her, from people who used her then abandoned her. Her lies weren't born from greed. They were built from pain, built to survive. The next morning, Ethan drove to the detention center. He wasn't sure what he would say, whether she'd even agree to see him, but he had to try. At the visitor's window, Sophia looked different, tired, older, honest. "I didn't expect you," she said, picking up the phone on her side of the glass. "I didn't expect a lot of things," Ethan said, "like finding the locket or the name Ariana." She looked down, swallowed hard. "So, you know." "I know enough," he said. "You must hate me." "No," Ethan said. "But I'm starting to understand you." She blinked, fighting something behind her eyes. "I was 16 when they dropped me in a state home," she said quietly. "They told me my mom died. No funeral, no goodbye. Just a trash bag full of clothes and a new name. Everything after that was me trying to survive, trying to matter." Ethan listened for the first time, not as a betrayed man, but as someone trying to see the whole truth. "You could have told me," he said. "I wanted to," she said, "but I was so used to hiding. I didn't know how to stop." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then she asked, "Why did you come?" He hesitated. "Because the dog never stopped barking. And now I know why." Back at home, Ethan opened the last letter from the envelope. It was signed by the woman in the photo, Officer L. Alvarez. "If she ever resurfaces, please know that she was loved. She was protected. She was taken from me because of a system that didn't believe a cop could raise a child alone. But she was my daughter, my heart. If you're reading this, take care of her. Give her a second chance." Ethan folded the letter. Mac sat at the window, watching the trees shift in the wind. There was peace in the air. But the story wasn't over. Not yet. It started with a call from an unknown number. Ethan was back in his office, Max asleep by the fireplace, when the phone rang. No caller ID, no voicemail, just one ring, then silence. He didn't think much of it at first, but it happened again the next morning and again that night. By the third call, he was listening. That week, Ethan made it his mission to help Sophia, or Ariana, as she was finally known to him now, clear the wreckage of her past. He hired a legal team, spoke to social workers, and filed motions to access sealed juvenile records. The goal wasn't to excuse what she had done but to understand it, to tell her full story. Her trial was coming soon, and if the judge only saw Elena Morales, the international con artist, she'd spend decades behind bars. But if they saw Ariana, the abandoned teenager, the foster kid failed by the system, the woman who never truly had a choice, there was a chance she could start over. "I'm not doing this because I still love her," Ethan told Margaret, who had watched his efforts with cautious silence. "I know," she replied. "You're doing it because it's the right thing." But Max knew something wasn't right. He grew restless again, pacing, barking at the window some nights. Ethan thought maybe the tension in the house had returned, but it was more than that. Then the envelope arrived, no name, no return address, just a blank manila package sitting inside Ethan's mailbox one morning. Inside, a single photo, a young woman, Ariana, at a train station, looking scared, and a note printed in bold block letters, "She's not who you think. Stay out of this." There was no signature, just a fingerprint smudge in the corner. Ethan stared at the photo. It looked old, faded at the edges, but someone had held onto it. Someone who knew exactly who she was and who didn't want her story told. He brought the envelope to the police, but it was brushed off as an intimidation tactic. "She's a public figure now," the officer said. "These things happen. Probably someone from a past con feeling burned." Ethan didn't believe that. He could feel something more dangerous under the surface. And Max felt it, too. That night, Max barked at the fence line. Ethan stepped out with a flashlight. No one was there, but the side gate, normally locked, was ajar. He fixed it. Didn't sleep. The next morning, he found muddy boot prints near the back porch. Meanwhile, in the detention center, Ariana was changing, too. She looked more herself, like a woman shedding masks she'd worn for too long. Her hair was natural now, no longer dyed or styled, her voice quieter, more grounded. "I got your envelope," Ethan told her through the glass during visitation. She nodded slowly. "I think someone from my past knows where I am," she said. "Who?" "There were a few men I worked with, back when I was really desperate. Not the fake marriages, the early stuff, identity trades. They made money off people like me, smuggled, forged, disappeared. And now they're afraid you'll talk." "I already did," she said, "in my statement to your attorney. So, they're warning me to back off." She nodded again, guilt clouding her face. "I never meant to bring danger to you," she said. "But you did," Ethan replied, then softer, "but I'm still here." She pressed her hand against the glass. He didn't ask why. He just pressed his against hers. That night, Ethan upgraded the security system on the house: cameras, floodlights, remote locks. Max slept with one ear open. At 2:47 a.m., the sensor on the back gate pinged, movement, then silence, then another ping closer to the porch. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and quietly opened the back door. Max stood beside him, growling low. No sound, just the rustling of leaves. Then he saw it, a man standing near the tree line, just beyond the reach of the motion lights, tall, hooded, watching. Ethan froze. Max did not. The German shepherd lunged off the porch, barking loud enough to wake the neighbors. The figure turned and ran. Ethan shouted. Max chased. The man disappeared into the woods. Police arrived 20 minutes later. They didn't find anyone, but they did find tire tracks at the edge of the road and a cigarette still burning near the gate. Someone had been waiting. The next morning, Ethan got a call from his lawyer. "Ariana was moved to protective custody last night," the voice said. "There's credible evidence she's at risk from her past, from the truth she finally told, from the people who never wanted her found." Later that day, Ethan found another envelope in the mailbox. Inside, a torn piece of a newspaper article dated 2009, "Teen runaway tied to ID theft ring in Texas." A grainy photo of Ariana, younger, hollow-eyed, scrolled across it in red marker, "You were warned." Ethan didn't go to the police this time. He went straight to the FBI. In a conference room downtown, he laid out everything: the envelopes, the threats, the surveillance footage. The agents listened, took notes, and finally admitted what Ethan already suspected. "There's a group operating out of Florida and South Texas," the lead agent said. "Human smuggling, fake identities, underground marriages to move money and legal status." Ariana was part of that. Ethan asked, "She was a tool?" "One of many, but she's the first to cooperate, which makes her dangerous to them." The agent leaned forward. "She's not just your wife, Mr. Daniels. She's a target." Back at the house, Ethan sat with Max on the porch steps, watching the sun dip behind the trees. "I don't know where this ends," he said. Max rested his head on Ethan's knee. "But I do know we're not backing down." The dog didn't move. He didn't need to. They were in this together now. It was raining again, the kind of slow, steady southern rain that soaked into the soil and whispered through the trees. Ethan sat in the front room, watching the droplets slide down the windowpane, coffee cooling in his hands. Max lay near the door, his head up, ears twitching at every car that passed. The house no longer felt like a house, not yet a home again, just a place holding its breath. Ariana had been gone for 3 days, moved to an undisclosed location under witness protection. The agent said it was temporary, just until they could bring in the last few people from the ID ring, the same men who had hunted her for years, the same ones who had found Ethan's address. He hadn't heard from her since she left, no calls, no notes, just the memory of her hand against the glass. That night, around 11 p.m., Max shot up from his spot and growled. Ethan was already halfway to the door. The security system beeped, driveway motion detected. He grabbed his phone, pulling up the camera feed. Headlights flashed once through the trees, then went dark. Then a knock, soft, rhythmic. He opened the door slowly. It wasn't Ariana. It was the FBI agent. She looked tired, serious. "They tried to intercept the transport van," she said. "Didn't make it far. Ariana's safe, but there's something you should know." Ethan stepped aside. Inside, the agent handed him a small, sealed envelope. "She wanted you to have this. She didn't know if she'd get to say goodbye." He hesitated, then opened it. There was no letter inside, just a photo, the same one from the locket, the little girl beside the female officer, smiling shyly at the camera. But this one had writing on the back, "Find her. Finish what I never could." Ethan looked up. The agent nodded. "Ariana wants to testify, but she also wants something more. She wants to find the woman in that picture, her mother, or maybe the officer who raised her. She thinks if anyone can do it, it's you." And that's how it started, not a rescue, a restoration. Over the next few weeks, Ethan poured everything into the search. With the FBI's help, he tracked old foster records, dug through forgotten case files, and followed leads across 3 states. Max was with him every step. At one point, they drove to a small town outside Atlanta. There, in a retirement home by the lake, they met Laura Alvarez. She was older now, with a tremble in her hands and eyes that had seen more loss than peace. But when she saw the photo Ethan handed her, she broke down. "That's my baby," she whispered. "They told me she ran away, that she didn't want to see me again." "She never stopped looking," Ethan said gently. "They just made sure she never found you." The reunion was quiet, no media, no fanfare, just 2 women, one broken by a system, one bruised by time, finding each other in the quiet corner of a fading afternoon. Max sat between them, tail gently thumping against the hardwood floor. A month later, the trial began. Ariana, now testifying under her real name, Ariana Rivera, told the full truth, no masks, no aliases, no lies. She confessed to her crimes, yes, but she also revealed the machinery behind it all, the men who ran the operations, the way they targeted girls like her, the promises of safety that turned into chains. She didn't cry on the stand. She didn't need to. The truth carried enough weight on its own. The verdict wasn't instant, but it was fair: time served, supervised release, and full immunity for testimony in future cases. Ariana walked out of the courtroom a free woman, and this time, she had someone waiting outside. 2, actually, Ethan and Max, tail wagging, tongue out, ears forward. She knelt in the parking lot, burying her face in Max's neck. "I missed you, boy," she whispered. Max let out a single bark, then licked her cheek. Ethan stood nearby, watching. He didn't need to say anything. They were starting over together. That summer, they planted a tree in the backyard, a live oak, sturdy, lasting, something that would grow with them. Max liked to nap in its shade, watching birds flutter past and squirrels chatter from above. He'd earned that peace. So had they. Ariana started volunteering at a local shelter, helping girls like her, foster kids, runaways, survivors of abuse, find their footing again. Ethan returned to work, but he came home earlier these days. He cooked more, listened more, laughed slowly again. And every evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Max took his place at the front porch, watching the world with wise, quiet eyes. Sometimes the loudest warnings don't come from people. Sometimes the truth hides behind perfect smiles and carefully rehearsed lives. And sometimes, a dog knows long before we do that what looks like love might be a cry for help or a second chance waiting to be heard. So here's a question for you: have you ever ignored your instincts, your inner voice, your Max, and later wished you hadn't? Would you be willing to forgive if the truth was more broken than the lie? If this story touched your heart, don't just watch, subscribe to K9 Miracle Stories now and join our community celebrating the incredible bonds between dogs and humans.